Good afternoon. My lesson is going to be on behavioral and social learning by Pavlov. Pavlov first introduced the theory that learning takes place through cause and effect relationships. This theory is commonly referred to as classical conditioning. Pavlov did research with dogs, and what he did was he paired food. He presented food to the dog. The dog would respond with salivating. Then he began to pair a bell with food, and the dog would salivate. He eventually was able to fade out the food, and just upon the presentation of the bell, the dog would begin to salivate. And that was what he referred to as classical conditioning in the laboratory setting. Cause and effect relationships ensure that certain things occur in combination with others, aka paired associations. For example, you can't start your car unless you turn on the ignition. You cannot walk through a door unless the door is first opened. A person who smiles is more likely to act in a friendly manner than one who frowns. Behavioral and social learning, learning to predict events in the environment and learning what stimuli tend to occur together are important for aligning behavior with the environment. Here's another real-world example of classical conditioning.
Hi, so today I'd like to talk to you about classical conditioning, or what's sometimes called Pavlovian conditioning, because it comes from research by Ivan Pavlov. So Pavlov was interested in digestion, specifically salivation in dogs. So dogs, and all creatures really, will salivate in response to food. But Pavlov noticed that his dogs started salivating before the food actually reached their mouths. They were responding to other stimuli in the environment. So he wanted to test this to see if he could get the dogs to salivate in response to a neutral stimulus that became associated with the food. And he found that he could. So classical conditioning isn't too hard to understand. Most people seem to catch on pretty quickly to what's going on. The problem is that people don't always see how classical conditioning can happen outside of this very contrived setting like a lab. So today I'd like to talk to you about a time that I was classically conditioned in a natural environment by natural events. So to tell you a bit about the situation, I went to college in a small Kansas town in this small campus covered with trees. And every winter, often during finals week, we would have ice storms. So ice would coat all of these trees. And as you can imagine, when branches get coated with ice, they get very heavy and they come crashing down, usually onto our heads. So, like I said, this happened during finals week. There was no escaping being on campus as we were going to and from our exams. And often, branches would come crashing down on our heads, leading us to respond by shielding our heads and ducking. It's kind of a reflex response. Fortunately for us, these branches don't come crashing soundlessly down. They're usually preceded by a crackling sound. So, crackling above our heads, branches come crashing down, shield our head. Crackle, branch, shield. So that's when something really strange happened. After a couple of times of branches falling down and shielding our heads, one time there was a crackling sound, and I quickly reached up and shielded my head without even thinking, even before the branch had come crashing down. I had been classically conditioned to respond to this neutral stimulus of crackling because it had become associated with the branch and shielding my head. So you can see how this is actually a pretty useful response. You get that many more seconds to shield your head and hopefully protect yourself from injury. So classical conditioning can happen really at any time, anywhere in the world, and it can lead to some really helpful and survival responses. So classical conditioning is about much more than salivating dogs. It's also about protecting a college student's head from ice-covered branches. Thank you.
Okay, and some other real-world examples. I happen to live in an area that's considered the lightning capital of the world, and I never experienced lightning in my lifetime like I've had since I've lived in my current house. And I remember one time I came home and drove down the driveway, went to get out of my vehicle during a horrible storm, and a crash of lightning. I heard this really loud crack and right near where my car door was, and it seemed like it was just yards or even feet possibly away from where the car door was. So now, as a result, if I'm coming home and it's starting to look like it's going to storm, if I hear thunder, my automatic response, I feel a little bit of anxiety inside, and I quickly get into the house. I definitely have been classically conditioned when it comes to my response during a storm. Another example, my dogs, I have 2 small dogs, and I have 2 small children. When the children were babies, upon hearing my dogs bark, they would cry. Now, as they have gone a little bit older, they're both toddlers now, they associate people coming to the house when the dogs bark. They hear the dogs bark, they think somebody's here. So the response from my children now are, as soon as the dogs bark, they go to the window. The children go to the window to see who might be here. My dogs, another example of classical conditioning, my dogs have been classically conditioned. When they hear the sound of my sliding glass door, little unlock and lock device click, they automatically stand up and they walk to the door because they know the next thing that's going to happen is the door is going to open and they can go outside. So there are several examples of how classical conditioning can be experienced in the real world setting. How is the Pavlovian theory different from other learning theories? Unlike other theories of learning, classical conditioning is the result of experiences in the environment, paired association as opposed to cognitive learning. Example, a mother's warm smile and calming voice toward her infant is then paired with being held in her arms. Conversely, a mother's frown and loud, harsh voice toward her infant paired with being held in her arms. The result elicit 2 different behaviors from the infant, cooing and smiling, or crying. Applications of the Pavlovian theory. It can be used to increase a student's attentiveness in the classroom. If the teacher's classroom is one of praise and enjoyment in learning, the student will associate this pleasurable experience with a specific class and will be more likely to attend to instruction. It can be used to reduce test anxiety. Negative testing associations from the past hinder a student's ability to effectively take exams. The teacher can create a learning and testing environment that fosters feeling of calm, thus diminishing the prior experiences of anxiety that led to testing phobia. When test taking is a no-pressure, positive environment over time, the classically conditioned response will become extinguished or disappear. It can be used to reduce episodes of physical ailments such as headaches, asthma, and high blood pressure. As students learn to associate the classroom environment, physical surroundings, teacher and or peer with feelings of calm and safety, the results are a reduction in physical and medical conditions. Whereas in the past, each unhealthy physical medical reaction served to perpetuate the present condition, thus strengthening the associated fears. Discussion questions. Identify 2 ways in which Pavlov's social learning theory can be applied in your classroom. This is for the students that are observing this lesson or participating in this lesson. A couple ways that I thought of how Pavlov's social learning theory can be applied in the classroom. If a teacher over time has a certain time in her class where she just kind of plays calm music for the purpose of calming the kids down. Maybe it's after lunch or after they come in from play to kind of get them calmed down and ready to learn again. There's maybe a 15-20 minute time per day over a month or so where she does this every day, plays calm music. And the teacher decides to start playing calm music as the kids enter the room. When she does this, she notices that the kids are automatically calmed down, they're quieted down, and they're ready to work. Those students have been classically conditioned. Another way to utilize classical conditioning in the classroom, say for example, a teacher over a period of time uses a timer to gauge the length of time that they have free choice. In other words, she gets a timer, she tells the students, you have X amount of time to engage in free choice, whichever activity you like to use, computer, reading center, etc. When the timer goes off, you're going back to your seats. if the